Well, I'm Kimberly. I'm 35. I own the bookstore on the hill, which is down next to 17 and 144. I've owned the store for about 2 years now, and we've lived in the area for about 5. Some of the biggest challenges I have faced are my son's medical diagnosis and being homeless. So I moved out at a very early age, and I was not, even though I was raised in the church, I definitely wasn't a follower of Christ yet. I wasn't even calling myself a Christian, let alone doing anything, believing as a Christian or living as a Christian. And I met and married a man who also did not love Jesus. And that affected every other aspect of our life. And he turned to drugs and alcohol, and he became very abusive. And when our child was 3 months old, I took him and I fled that situation. We've been homeless twice. When I left my abusive husband, we lived in the car for a while, and he was only 3 months old, so he doesn't remember that time. We talk about it often because I don't want to hide, not just the mistakes I made, but how far we've come from him. And so we lived in the car for a little bit because I was not close with my family. Like I said, I moved out at a very early age. And at this point, we had a falling out. We had not spoken in a couple years at this point, and I certainly wasn't going home. Looking back now, my first husband had a lot of substance abuse problems that definitely changed his personality when on them. And my second husband did not. So it was definitely different types of abuse, and I was so quick to rush through the lesson that I didn't actually learn the lesson. And when I left him, it was like going right back to where we were, but 10 years later. We walked out of there without a place to live. I just knew we had to walk out. And I fully believe that particular day, his brother just happened to come by. And I think if his brother wasn't there, we'd both be dead. When my son was 2 months old, he was medically injured, and he stopped breathing, and his brain was without oxygen for a certain amount of time. And they don't exactly know how long his brain was without oxygen for, and we weren't sure what the repercussions of that would be. I was very fortunate that he lived through it. And when I was at college, I met a woman there named Carmen, who invited me to come to her ladies group at church. And it was just a fun, it wasn't even a preaching thing. It was a get together. It was a earring stealing exchange, like a white elephant. And I went with her, and I did not know that she was the pastor's mom. But I just felt surrounded by just kind-hearted women, and I was like, I want to be a part of this. So when she invited me to come with her on Sunday morning, I went with her. And it was during that worship service that I really heard God call me home, that it didn't matter how far I had wandered away, that I could come back. And that was really when I gave my life back to Christ. It was right around that same time that we were sent to a speech therapist for my son because he wasn't talking yet. And the speech therapist sent us to a neurologist. And the neurologist is the one who told me that from the time his brain was without oxygen at 2 months old, that I was looking at a lifetime of care for him, that he would probably never speak, that he wouldn't function in society. And he really, he wasn't trying to be harsh with me. He was just trying to prepare me for what that kind of life would look like. And that really stripped me of all hope at the time. I went to my brother's house straight from the neurologist's office. My sister-in-law and I were pregnant at the same time, so we had boys the same age. And I was already a hot mess of tears when I showed up at their house. And my brother is not one for that. So he took the boys and he left. And I sat on Nicole's couch with her and I cried for hours. I cried over the life he wouldn't have. I cried over his wife that he wouldn't have. I cried over a job he wouldn't hold down. This whole life I had built up for him in my head, that was all mine. Nicole let me cry for hours. And then she finally said to me, she said, "All right, biblically, you have until sundown to be upset. And then you have to decide whether you trust God with you and Bo's life or not." And it was that moment. That was exactly what I needed to hear. God knew exactly what I needed to hear. And I decided then that I do trust him. I do trust him. And that was the moment that I got saved at that altar, but I really gave my life to Christ on that couch with Nicole. And he started speaking within 6 months of craniosacral therapy, and he started doing full sentences within a year of that therapy. And you guys have met him, you know, he definitely talks. He's not going to start the conversation, but he will join it. But he does so much more than that girl on that hopeless couch ever thought he would. And I fully expect him to still live a full and complete life, no matter whether he has a wife or no matter whether he holds a job down. And I fully expect him to, because I know he's watching this too. I do expect these things as a parent for him and from him now, because I have seen the way God has just completely lifted us both out of what was hopelessness. We had an opportunity to move over here, and COVID hit just after we moved over here. And I lost the job that I had set up over here, and I happened to be in the bookstore, and I noticed the older gentleman that was in there, his hand was shaking when he was running the payments. And I told him I was out of work at the time and if he needed some help in the store, and I gave him my card. He called me the next day, and I started the next day. And 8 months later, I bought it from him. And then I've had the store for 2 years now, and we are about to close on a home next week. It is okay to ask for help. We all struggle in 100 different ways, and a lot of times we feel like it's shameful to ask for help. You know, I struggle with the shame of being divorced twice. I struggle with the shame of being homeless twice, of telling people that I've been homeless. But we all struggle in such different ways, and there is nothing wrong with asking for help. I am an overcomer.